Proud supporters of Africa this week. Engine, with us, you are number one.
Welcome back to Africa This Week. In this part of the program, we look at conflict, debt and oil in East Africa. The armed forces of Sudan and South Sudan clashed in the border region claimed by both sides this week in a rare direct confrontation between the old civil war foes. Both countries said they would bring complaints against the other to the United Nations, moves likely to hinder already tense talks over issues such as oil and debt that have been unresolved since South Sudan seceded in July. Maurice Nsamba, research fellow at the African Research and Resource Forum, gave his insight into the security risks in that region.
So far, cannot indicate in any way that we are at risk of a full-blown war. However, we must also appreciate the fact that there are quite a number of unresolved issues, as you've said, oil, Abyei, the border demarcations, and the manner in which these issues will be articulated at national and regional level, at international level, will have an effect in terms of economic development of Southern Sudan and the entire region.
So, should we take the view then that this is likely to be just a flash in the pan, and therefore both sides recognize the gravity of engaging in a full-scale civil war and therefore will step away from the brink?
Yeah, definitely. I think no side, neither South Sudan or Sudan is interested in a full-blown war. And I think for Sudan, a full-blown war puts it at a much graver risk. Of course, at the present situation, the levels of trust between the two parties are there at low level. But of course, there is headway that has been so far made in terms of settling and making headway on a number of issues in Southern Sudan and the relation between the two Sudans.
But who is to blame for this latest flash in the conflict between the two sides?
I think at this particular moment we cannot put blame. I would squarely say that the North is responsible or South Sudan is responsible.
Well, North Sudan, Maurice says that the South tried to attack 6 times and they were repulsed. On the other hand, South Sudan says, oh, these guys came and hit our area, and the Northern Sudanese are saying, hang on, this is not your area at all.
I think we need to look at the context within which all these issues are happening. In the first place, you need to acknowledge the fact that on both sides, there are militia groups which are outside the control of the formal security forces on the other side.
Right.
We also need to appreciate the fact that the issues that the militia groups put on table are not within the framework within which the two parties, that's Sudan and South Sudan, operate or can, within their context, manage. And therefore, it creates a particular framework within which none of the two Sudan can say that it's squarely responsible for whatever is happening. So I think, in my view, the most important thing to do is to look beyond a single event, to look at much more bigger and broader issues in the region and between the two parties.
So let's talk about those broader issues, and also let's talk about the issues beyond those on the surface. We know there's disagreement on the division of the potential oil wealth between the two countries. But beyond this, are we looking here at a long-running border dispute we've seen develop and continue to fester between Ethiopia and Eritrea? Is there a risk here that could well be on one of those again?
Yeah, I think when it comes to, if we look at it in broader terms, and if we start with the border issue, I think you need also to appreciate the fact that in the entire region, and that's the Eastern Africa and the Horn of Africa, almost each country has a border issue. And these border issues are historical in nature. Here are communities or countries, if you wish, with border communities or border societies. These borders were arbitrarily drawn. And for you to now come and say that you're going to demarcate a border, you're cutting between communities, it's going to be very difficult because some of these people have learned to live, some of them outside the state, and there are issues within those communities that cannot be settled easily.
Right.
In the case of North Sudan and South Sudan, I think the most important issue here is oil.
Right.
We need to know that in both countries, oil is a key economic resource, a key revenue earner.
Yeah.
And for any country to accept, to release, or to let go of that, it's going to be very difficult.
Sure.
Especially where there is no alternative. In the case of Southern Sudan, oil funds, or you could say almost the sole source of revenue for government, funding 90% of government expenditures. So, of course, you expect tensions, especially where there are no alternatives.
Yeah. Let's blame the British and then forget about the British because they came a long time ago and went away. So largely this is a conflict between ourselves. But let's talk about in whose interest this war may be if it comes out to a full war. Is it in the interest of South Sudan to be engaged in this war as a way of trying to resolve the whole oil issue and get perhaps international opinion on its side, so perhaps they end up with a larger share of the oil wealth than they have now?
I think for South Sudan, it has been stated clearly by the political leadership that it's not interested in a full-blown war. And I think it's the same case with North Sudan in the sense that I think the Bashir government is trying now to sort, if you wish, to sort of win political favor at an international level. So any attempt to go full-blown conflict is likely to jeopardize that agenda.
A new report says increased competition for land, water, forest products and mineral resources within territories in East Africa is a major trigger of intercommunal violence. Molu Tepo, consultant with Minority Rights Group International, authors of the report, explained.
If we can look back, the last 3 years in Kenya has been, in Kenya and also in the region, the drought has been very bad. The threat of Al-Shabaab also in Kenya has been on the rise. And so the pastoralists and the minorities and the indigenous people in Kenya and in Sudan and in Uganda and in southern Sudan, they've been having huge challenges, facing huge challenges, and their livelihood depending on the natural resources, on the rain. Their survival is at great risk. And we carried out this report at the right time, and I think the recommendations which were made will be able to help the international community, the civil society, the communities themselves to think of ways of going ahead into the future.
Talk us through the key recommendations. What are you saying to authority? How must they deal with the physical insecurity caused by the political situation, and then also cope with the pressure on resources as they have so little to go around agriculturally in terms of land?
I think the whole challenge we have is on policy, and the policy has never been friendly to the pastoralists and the indigenous people and the minorities. And with the diminishing land, with also the impact on the livelihood from external threats like climate change, we are talking of a future which is bleak for the pastoralists and the minorities in East Africa. And the recommendations will definitely be carried forward by the international community, the civil society organizations in the 3 countries of Uganda, Kenya, and the Sudan. And we expect also the governments, institutions like the parliament to take up the challenge and respond to the needs of these marginalized groups within these 3 countries.
The issue about pastoralists and nomads in general is that they're always moving around. So it's really hard for any local government authority to get them into the system and try to put them within a welfare network where in the event of an economic downturn, they can receive food stamps or whatever is on offer, free healthcare. So how do you cope with that kind of dynamic?
I think the pastoralists have gone through, the pastoralists have been using this system of responding to their needs for ages, and they have knowledge, they have the wisdom. If only the governments can talk to them, can find out, the wisdom behind the movement of livestock, then I think we'll have solution. Movement is not for nothing. Pastoralists move because they respond to diseases, they respond to pasture, they respond to need for water, and also threat from external sources. So I think the solution lies with the people. The people must be consulted. They have the solution. If we can talk to them on equal level. The problem is that most of the time the government would come up with policies without consulting the pastoralists, and eventually the consumers of the policy do not even understand some of these policies.
On December the 10th, this year's laureates will receive their Nobel Prizes during award ceremonies in Oslo. This year's Nobel Peace Prize is shared by President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia, her compatriot Lema Gobowe, and Tawakkul Karman of Yemen. Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs Jonas Gahr Store had this to say.
Norway congratulates the 3 outstanding women who win this year's Nobel Peace Prize. They are also highlighting the crucial dimension of including women in peaceful settlement of conflict and transition towards sustainable development in countries emerging from conflict. The landmark Security Council Resolution 1325 sets out a good chart of how to follow up on women in conflict, including women in conflict, and that's an important part of Norwegian foreign policy. Including women, drawing on women's experience is of course the right thing to do from a gender perspective. But it also makes sense because women carry so much responsibility, so much experience from fragile societies that excluding them is simply stupid. Including them makes sense and gives us a much more solid foundation for building peace. We try to emphasize that in Norway's foreign policy, the way we do our own engagement in peace and security and the way we support international processes for peace and security in post-conflict situations.
Let's take Liberia as an example. Brutal warlords, all of them men, destroyed the nation. Then some grassroots women, Lema Gobowe, one of them, but also some elite women, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the president, they both took up the struggle against these warlords and they've been successful. Today it's peace in Liberia and have started the process towards long-term prosperity.
Well, that's all for this edition of Africa This Week. Join us again next week for another roundup of the top stories in Africa. From me, Mashudu Masuta, and the team, it's goodbye.